Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. India has seen multiple insurgencies and civil strife since independence. Nagaland, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, and then the Maoist regions of central India. In Manipur, the violence has been on since May 2023. It's over 16 months now. Over 200 people have died and over 60,000 persons displaced. But what differentiates this prolonged phase of unrest from all others post-independence is the kind of ordnance that both warring factions are using. Over 2,000 assault rifles, hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition still missing. Adding to that is this new and worrying prospect of mobile artillery, believe it or not, homemade rockets, drones dropping grenades, and rockets being fired into civilian areas. Manipur is on fire today. Can it spread across India? Joining me to discuss this worrying scenario are Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former DG Infantry, Mr. PK Mishra, former Inspector General of Police, BSF, and my colleague Kartikeya Sharma in the studio with me, who's been tracking the situation in Manipur for the last 16 months on a trot. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. General Kulkarni, you've seen that video of the wheeled artillery launcher being used by one of the warring groups in Manipur. What are your thoughts? How worried should we really be? Artillery being used in civil strife in India, it's possibly unheard of.
Sandeep, extremely sad. Sad because there's total trust deficit now. And that is what has led to these kind of improvised ammunition, improvised rockets. You know, you have what they call it as 10 feet long tubes with about 4 to 5 kgs of explosive, about 30 kgs of weight, a range of about 5 kilometers, wheeled kind of artillery also being used, explosive devices being used, all kinds of weapons, INSAS, SLRs, carbines, LMGs, and you name a thing, grenades, anything and everything, commercial drones, commercial weaponry, all of it improvised, because since Second World War, people are quite adept at all these kind of things.
Yes.
And over and above, there's 45 million people in the northeast states with about 400 kinds of communities that live.
Right.
Manipur alone has about 33 kinds of ethnic tribes, about 40 insurgent groups, 3.3 million population, over 50% of it is the Meiteis, the rest of them are Kukis, Jos, and the rest Nagas and all. So you find that, but what differentiates, what makes this different from before is the hatred. Total trust deficit, which is somehow, at least I cannot, because having lived with them, having known both sides of these communities so well, this kind of a hatred seems somewhere, some foreign hand, maybe, of course, they had 18,000 acres of poppy land being destroyed by the government. That is one major thing also that could have led to this kind of thing. Myanmar, in kind of turmoil, so insurgents coming in from there also, ethnicity commonality with Mizoram. So there's so much that is happening.
There's so much that's happening, General Kulkarni, and thanks for setting that up. The fact that you mentioned that there could be a foreign hand involved in this. I'm going to ask Kartikeya, my colleague, about this. Kartikeya, you've been following Manipur 16 months now on a trot. You haven't taken a break. I think no one's done that in the Indian media the way you have followed it. But you're also looking eastwards, beyond Manipur. You've always been talking of this civil war that's on in Myanmar. The military junta doesn't control 60% of Myanmar. It's unprecedented, the civil war. What is the kind of collusivity that we are seeing between the rebel groups in Myanmar and the groups in Manipur?
You see, there are three things here. The first is that because of the easy movement of people, the kin solidarity is far more accentuated. In order to express solidarity, people can move in and out of the border. I have travelled from More to Tamu at a point of time, and you would just need to show your local identity card. And I realized that there was no border except a checkpoint.
Yes.
The border is not fenced, it's not patrolled that way. You don't have border patrolling, aggressive border patrolling the way people are used to watching it on TV in Rajasthan, Gujarat, or RS Pura sector. So that sort of a border patrolling is not there. Secondly, there is a terrain difficulty, which is that it's mountainous, and mountainous in the sense that these are not rolling slopes. These are tough slopes. And the third thing is that the colonial issues are mapped on the terrain of Northeast. You have a Tamil colony in Moray. People tell me that you don't have Tamils there now. They have left. So you have a lot of people from the other parts of this country being there, the labor, indentured labor.
Yeah.
But the larger issue here is that this conflict is unique because entire communities have got polarized.
Yes.
The Kukis and the Maitis.
You're literally talking of two states within
The
one state.
and the demonization between two communities have taken place. So, in absence of a large, towering leader who can be trusted from all sides, this has become more accentuated. Biren Singh, as a chief minister, is seen as a Maiti chief minister. He is not being seen as a Kuki or the chief minister of Manipur. But then, you also have to account for one thing, that just because Maitis are in majority doesn't mean that their thought process is majoritarian in nature.
Right.
Because any majority anywhere in the world, if the narrative becomes that they will turn into an ethnicity, they will have a problem.
Yes.
It's like Hindus in India. You say that from a nationality, you will turn into an ethnicity.
Right.
You will have a problem with that. So Manipur has become complex for multiple reasons, but one thing I can tell you, that I have realized that the sort of interventions that had taken place in previous insurgencies, for example in Assam, or for example, the reason why I use Punjab again and again is that Rajiv Gandhi had to send Arjun Singh as governor to Punjab, or for example, the positioning of Mr. Vora, or former raw chief in Jammu and Kashmir. That sort of a pace, that sort of a urgency, I have not witnessed in Manipur.
In Manipur, and
maybe it is because the leadership is invested in the current political leadership. Then I think, as other commentators have said, that sometimes the political equations are getting better of larger national security issues. But again, let me tell you, right now in Manipur, people say that you can change Biren Singh, you can change. The situation is not going to become normal. It can only become normal if there is a trust factor in an average Manipuri with each other.
Absolutely. That trust deficit is something that should worry all of us between the two communities.
My argument like this. And I can say that a very big foundation, a gentleman associated with RSS, currently now working out of state in BJP, invited a lot of intellectuals from Manipur. 2 days, I was part of it. I was there to just listen to them. Even that gentleman, in both the days, could get one day all the Maitis and the second day all the Kukis.
Even the peace negotiator couldn't get both of them together in the same room.
So first day I met all the Maitis and second day I met all the Kukis. I did not meet them together. That is why in my panel, I ensure, that was the biggest learning curve. Whatever show I do, I try to do, if it is not a pure national security thing, in which I only require IPS or defense officers or people in security, I ensure there is another voice.
That's tragic that even in television debates you cannot get two communities on the same panel.
It is very difficult to conduct a very civil debate because things generally become personal.
Absolutely. Mr. Mishra, you've been in the BSF for many years. The firewalling is something that the military does very well. The security forces, if there is a forest fire, for instance, you firewall that area, you dig a fire trench, you prevent the fire from spreading. Manipur is on fire right now. We've just seen this unprecedented scenes of mobile homemade artillery being used by both sides. They're both armed to the teeth with infantry weapons. They're using drones to drop grenades. The Home Ministry plans to fence the entire India-Myanmar border, 1643 kilometers, I think out of which only 10 kilometers have been done so far. How easy or how difficult is this going to be? Is this as easy as it's being debated, or is it going to take several years and possibly will even outlast the conflict?
Sandeep, one thing you are asking this question to a person who has made the fencing, who has constructed the fencing in Jammu international border opposite to Sialkot and Pakistan from Pathankot to Akhnur. I made
Right.
it in 1.5 years,
Right.
195-kilometer patch.
Absolutely.
And I have seen personally a complete border of Manipur to
Yes.
Myanmar. Each and at the best part of it, every village on the hills, which are adjacent to the international border of Myanmar, I have gone and I have operated. So Manipur, I remained for about 15 years. I have served in Manipur. But what I could visualize, the distrust which has come now.
Yes.
When I last visited Churachandpur last month, after, in fact, much after the KNF MC's parade, which was made their national day, I'm urging the parade, I visited Churachandpur, of course. I went along with the Paite. I had no problem. I was
Right,
secured. I was
right.
feeling secure. But the way the weapons were paraded,
Distrust.
I'm telling
Yes.
nobody's business. You can't think of how these weapons have landed up there in Churachandpur,
Yes.
and how come they were not seized also that day when the parade was taking place.
Right.
Yes, I was listening to Mr. Kartikeya, and he was just telling, yes, the fencing will take time. The fencing has started. The fencing is continuing for last 1 year. And the More Tamu portion they are making.
Yes.
More and Tamu border is not Myanmar border of Manipur. It's a very vast border. And if you think that there is difficulty in making because it's mountainous terrain and jungles are there, and there will be problem from the opposite side, certainly not. We have made it in Srinagar border, we have made it in Punjab border, we have made it in Jammu border. What is the real factor now? As Kartikeya was just speaking,
Yes.
if your fencing will take place, it may take some time. What's the problem of guarding the border in a BOP concept? Making border outpost and observation posts like Punjab border, Rajasthan border, Srinagar border, Jammu border, and Gujarat border. What is the problem? You take maximum 10 battalions. And I hope within 15 days the border can be blocked.
Absolutely.
This is one.
Right.
And I'm telling you, yes, the dimension of the classes. We have seen the ethnic class in Jiribam.
Yeah.
Why Jiribam is famous? Kartikeya was telling he had one full evening on Jiribam. And why Jiribam is famous? Jiribam is really, this is the ethnic class which is going on in Jiribam because it's the logistical approach to
Yes.
Manipur.
Yes.
And that is what both the groups, they are trying to have power there. They want to forcibly occupy the territory and remove others from there. Like in More, they have removed one of the community. I am
Yes.
not going to mention any community. And we
Right.
lost about 5 persons there. A person sleeping was shot dead. And the worst part of it, of course, slightly political, I'm adding in this. We have a chief minister who cannot visit Jiribam.
Yes.
We have a chief minister who cannot go to Churachandpur. I have gone to Churachandpur. I stayed there for 3 days when Sambit Patra was there.
Right.
Of course, he did visit Churachandpur. But why a chief minister cannot go to his own area? This is another problem. The problem of trust deficit is
The
there.
trust
from
deficit, I
both
think,
sides.
yes, Mr. Mishra, I think you made that point very strongly. The fact that the trust deficit is the main issue in Manipur right now. The fact that it's one state, but it's actually, in reality, it's 2 states. It's just cleaved down ethnic lines.
Sandeep, I will let you know of this.
Yes.
I have seen the buffer zone myself. You know, you cross Visnupur district.
Yes.
Once you cross Moirang, you reach Kwakta, Turbung Baglon, Terak, Khongsang B. These are the 3 places. The moment you cross you are in another country.
Absolutely.
And up to Mekong, it is another
And
country.
that should
What is
worry
this
all of us,
going on?
Mr. Mishra. This
And,
thing, while it's okay to
yeah.
discuss this, but on the ground, I mean, this as
Yeah.
Indians, we should be ashamed of the fact that you have states of India
Yeah.
where one community cannot go into the other, and that deep sense of distrust that prevails, as all of you have just brought out. But General Kulkarni, there's no option now for us but to demilitarize Manipur. How can you do it in this climate of mistrust? Just outline for us the path ahead. If Manipur is to be demilitarized, if all of these country-made weapons, this homemade artillery, drone bombs and all of that has to be taken out of the equation, how would you proceed it? What are the kind of steps that need to be taken? Distrust, of course, it's easier said than done, that to remove distrust, but how would you proceed?
See, Sandeep, distrust is there. That's why these buffer zones have come up.
Yes.
You can imagine one community not trusting the police, the other community does not trust Assam rifles. So you have all these kind of things happening over there. Best is, as I've said, it is no more, you can't fire a gun from somebody else's shoulder. It's the president's rule. You have
Right.
to put the assembly under suspension and impose president's rule. There is no way if these two communities, and I have friends in both the communities, and
Yes.
both the communities are rather, all of Manipur is excellent lot of people, unbelievably so sweet, but
Right.
just see that kind of trust deficit which has led them to different administrative zone demand, to different state demand, nothing to do with one another. And it becomes more and more difficult, like you rightly said. After all, one community is occupying the hills, which is just about, say, 30 to 40% occupying the hills. It's a 90%. And the balance of the 50-odd% of the community is in 10% of the plains, which is also not good. Because after all these weapons, whatever it be, artillery, or you start having improvised and you have drones dropping impact bombs, you'll have from the hills flying in onto the plains, from the plains taking off and onto the hills. This
Yes.
kind of a situation is not acceptable. The only way, as I see right now, is the president's rule with a view to ensure, and once the president's rule is imposed on everybody, nothing doing, you have to get all the weapons back into the armory. 5,600 weapons looted.
Yes.
Not even 25% of them are back. 6,50,000 rounds looted. God alone knows, not even 10,000 may be back. At this kind of rate, and all kinds of weapons, SLRs, you have
Yes.
INSAS, you have AK-47, 9mm, pistols, 12 bores, all kinds of improvised
All
weaponry.
weapons in military service
anything.
have been looted. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, and therefore it's had mortars of all kinds, and the bombs. You have 36 HE hand grenades, you have 51mm bombs. What is all this? This is virtually like two warring parties where, and now it is. I think it's enough. Is enough. We cannot. For sure, we
Enough
know
is
that
enough,
no one
absolutely.
community can do it, and
Yes.
therefore the president's rule: keep the president assembly in suspension. Don't dismiss them all. Keep them in suspension at least for another 6 months. There should be president's rule, and you'll find things will start coming back to normalcy.
Absolutely. Kartikeya, president's rule, the only way out in Manipur?
I think what is required is a new normal. What is required is a messaging that the Nizam has changed.
Right.
What is required in Manipur is that new set of rules are being enforced. Right now what is happening is that Manipur is in the same frame. You have some months of the so-called peace, which I would say is a sense of ordinariness, but it hasn't
Yes.
broken into violence. But you see, how can you have a peace in society which is so vitiatedly
Armed
divided?
to the teeth.
Armed to the teeth is one,
Yes.
but it is so divided.
Yes.
You see, it's a difficult thing to say, but people become angry when you say that. The point is that it is an ethnic strife in
Yes.
Manipur. First, you need to accept the problem, na?
Yes.
It's an ethnic issue.
Yep.
It's an ethnic issue. People don't want to sit together. They're contesting histories. Even the contested name of the place.
Yes.
Chura Chandpur, Lamka, we can get into all those details, but the fact of the matter is, someone has to say, well, this is the new way in which we are going to govern Manipur. And I would say what has happened is, political leaders have done great disservice to Manipur.
Right.
I always say Gandhi Nuakhali. I use it like a metaphor.
Right.
I mean, so there is not one person who I can say can cross over the border and become acceptable. What about the peace committee?
Yes.
I think there was a peace committee. Nothing has happened of it. What about the inquiry?
Yes.
Inquiry must conclude these are memorialization of memories, and memories are audited through which the reconciliation takes place. It's like handling a trauma. And the most important of all, what about the cases which had been transferred? Justice has to be given.
Yes.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
Absolutely.
So many other parts of the machine have not been taken care of. Military is there to protect us.
Yes.
But military obviously needs a political objective.
Right.
If I say, yes, general, you take over, but he has to be given a political objective.
Right.
So what is the political objective? Who is talking to whom?
Absolutely. I think that you've hit the nail on the head, Kartikeya. The fact is that the political process doesn't seem to have taken off at all in Manipur, and in the absence of that,
who takes the initiative? Who takes the initiative from center? That is
Yes.
why I used Arjun Singh's example.
yes,
That
a
is
governor.
why
You need a governor to
I mean,
take
you
over.
say some person who said
Yes.
that this is the way we are going to resolve it. So many important people were sent to Kashmir.
Right.
Not many succeeded, but the center continued to send them there.
Yes, and it's really worrying, Kartikeya. It's that we're
Even
speaking
Modi
of
did-
Kashmir
even Modi
and
did that.
Manipur in the same breath. I mean, I never thought we'd see the day, but here we are. Manipur's explosive arsenal, LMGs, assault rifles, drone bombs, and homemade artillery. But the biggest weapon of them all, as our panelists just told us, is the fear and the mistrust among the communities in a state that's so divided. Thank you very much for joining us, General Kulkarni, Mr. Mishra, and my colleague Kartikeya Sharma. On the 21st of September, Prime Minister Modi will be in Delaware in the United States to participate in the Quad meeting with the US, Australia, and Japan. Now, one of the areas of concern for the Quad is China. Now, exactly a month later, in October, Prime Minister Modi will be in Kazan, Russia, to participate in the 16th BRICS summit, which is meant to be an alternate grouping of countries which believe that the era of a Western-led global system is over. Now, there's one country that's common to both Quad and BRICS. That's India. And this is one of the facets of Modi-plomacy for you. What are the other features of Modi-plomacy? And what are the challenges it faces as the world heads into uncertain times? Joining me to discuss this are Dr. Arvind Gupta, Director of the Vivekananda International Foundation, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, India Practice Head of the Eurasia Group, and my colleague Kartikeya Sharma, who remains with me in the studio. Dr. Gupta, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. Sir, define for us Modi-plomacy, this unique brand of diplomacy that Prime Minister Modi has crafted and that we've seen play out over the last decade. What are its unique features according to you?
Well, if you look at the record of last 10 years, Indian foreign policy has had a very clear direction. And I think the framework of Indian foreign policy has been to expand engagements in all directions, link up foreign policy with the domestic priorities, and also, as they say, overcome the hesitations of the past and engage in areas where we have generally been reticent, say defense and security, so a lot of engagements in that area, but also bring a new energy to economic diplomacy and technology. And on top of that, the unique feature of Modi diplomacy has been people-to-people contacts, and in which diaspora, etc., have played a major role. While doing this, I think national interests have been very much kept in view, and the effort has been to make sure that your national interests at all times are defined as clearly as possible. And then I think once you have a clear framework, diplomacy becomes easier. And I think one great example of this was visible last year when India hosted the G20.
Right.
The courage which I think India showed in setting the overarching theme of the G20, using a Sanskrit word and Vasudev Kutumbakam, underlining the civilizational attributes of India which I think was a very courageous step. And he had that courage to do that.
Courageous
So,
step indeed, yes. And thanks, Dr. Gupta, for outlining Modi diplomacy, the pillars of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy connect. But Pramit, you know, one of the pillars of Prime Minister Modi's diplomacy is the neighborhood first pillar, where it says that, you know, India cannot really prosper without the neighborhood being settled, without us having excellent relations in the neighborhood. And indeed, that was Prime Minister Modi's promise. But, you know, in the last couple of years, we've seen numerous challenges to this neighborhood first policy. You have, of course, this ongoing thing with Pakistan, a standoff with China, Bangladesh and Myanmar in turmoil, and Sri Lanka and Maldives literally in the Chinese camp. Is this neighborhood policy going to be the biggest challenge that Prime Minister Modi's Modi diplomacy is going to face in the next 4 years or so?
Well, I think the neighborhood will always be the main challenge for every prime minister in India, because because of our sheer size, small neighbors in particular always have, should we say, a lot of concerns about what India is up to. For Indians, I think it's a bit of a surprise when we go to countries like Nepal or Sri Lanka and find that they are full of conspiracy theories about India in the way that sometimes Indians used to be about the United States or China. So we will always struggle a bit on that side. There will be a degree of suspicion. And second, we've also sought to try to rid these countries of a tendency for at least one political party in each of these countries to become, to see itself as anti-Indian. That we have a pro-Indian and an anti-Indian posture in these political systems is something we've tried to avoid. We've basically made the argument, and this precedes Prime Minister Modi, that no matter who is in power, no matter which political center exists in these countries, all of them should see India as a friend and as their primary strategic and economic partner. If you remember when Modi came to power in 2014, forget Pakistan and China, they are perpetually going to be a problem for us. But we had a hostile government in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
We had a hostile government in the Maldives. I mean, very hostile. Yamin and the Rajapaksas. We had a friendly government in Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh, obviously.
Yes.
And Nepal was Nepal, you know, they changed it. Literally, I think there was an article recently said it's the most unstable democracy in the world. They change prime ministers almost every year. So at any given point, there will be one out of every 4 of these prime ministers is going to play an anti-India card. We were able to reverse Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, you saw the Sirisena government, strongly backed by India, come in.
Yes.
Sirisena was replaced again by a government that was at least a little bit more realistic. The Rajapaksas came back, a little bit more realistic about India. But then they had a crisis. The Rajapaksas were completely wiped out. But now you have a situation where all the 4 major candidates, including the JVP candidate, who are a party that was almost created on the basis of a hatred for India, all saying that they accept that they have to work with India, and a Sri Lanka reasonably grateful that the country that saved them from almost starvation in this crisis was India. Maldives, you had an interesting case where Yamin was replaced by a pro-Indian candidate. Unfortunately for us, in the last election, 2 of the 3 candidates were pro-Indian, but fought with each other, divided the pro-India vote, if you wish, allowed an anti-Indian candidate in. But what is interesting about Muizu, the present Maldivian, he tried very hard to find an alternative to India. He went to China, he went to Turkey, he went to the Gulf, and each of them he says, I'll be your man against India if you will extend finances to me. All of them said, sorry, that's not going to work. Even China said, we're not interested. And he came back and he said, with reluctance, I have no choice but to work with India. And the same with Nepal. We saw Oli try really hard to create a crisis with India. It didn't get him anything in Nepal politically. He was out of office as fast as any other prime minister Nepal has been. So and replaced by a man, Prachanda, who began his career as an anti-India candidate.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? I mean, he was the man who hated India the most, and he's now the most pro-Indian person in Nepal. So I would argue that if you look at it over a period of time, each of these countries, one by one, is coming to the realization, even among those who don't like India, we have no choice but to work with India.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
And I think that is also what we're going to see now in Bangladesh, where we have an interim government that is neutral, but has members and groups within it which are very anti-Indian. But I think as we're going to see over time that this government will come to the conclusion, actually, we have no choice.
You have no choice. As they say in politics, Pramit, the Tina factor. And India seems to be the Tina of South Asia. But Kartikeya, you remember when Prime Minister Modi was sworn in 10 years ago, most people didn't know anything about his foreign policy, what it was going to be like. We had a fair idea because we saw a lot of the SAARC leaders there for the swearing in. But lo and behold, you had a very dramatic foreign policy being unveiled by Prime Minister Modi in the first couple of years. But I'm going to add to this. In the next couple of months, what we are going to be seeing is a lot of Prime Minister Modi traveling abroad. He's literally, the Air Force, the Indian Air Force One is going to be flying, getting a lot of frequent flyer miles, first to the US, then off to Russia. Is this Prime Minister Modi's way of getting international wins, international support for India, when his domestic polity is under challenge from coalition partners?
I think you're talking about Ukraine. I think that's where the focus
Can he be the
is.
peacemaker?
I think that's a legacy issue.
Yes,
it's a legacy issue. So legacy issues are decided by outcomes.
Right.
So you can have a Bandung, but you can have a different outcome.
Yes.
But I would say that the Modi's foreign policy from 2014 till now is both substance plus spectacle plus personality.
Right, very interesting.
Now, if you look
substance, spectacle, and personality.
So, if you, as a child, when I would go to the Prime Minister's library, I was very fascinated by Panditji's journey to Czechoslovakia in 1930s. Panditji going to Thimphu, or Panditji in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
There were personal memories and personal imprint enmeshed with India's foreign policy.
Yes.
To some extent, Indira Gandhi did it, but I would limit myself to Jawaharlal Nehru.
Right. But that's an important point because all prime ministers are essentially foreign ministers as well.
Absolutely. But in this case, Prime Minister Modi has taken it to a different level.
Yes.
Because in 1930s, it was Gandhiji who sent Jawaharlal Nehru to mobilize an international opinion. That's why Panditji was in Europe talking about imperialism and other issues. Now, what he has done, Prime Minister Modi, the diaspora politics and utilizing it for a couple of things. For example, diaspora politics is like a political blitzkrieg in India, that's like show of strength abroad and it sends a message home, as very rightly said by the first speaker, connection of the foreign policy with domestic concern.
Yes.
But in that domestic concern, I would add a political concern, political. Right. And any politician has to be political, so it's okay. So it's a go-go for me. Second thing is, which is part and parcel of Modi's diplomacy, him being at the center of things, him being at the center of things, the way he holds people, the pat, the hugs, there is a different style which has come into operation. That is another important, because that's how people consume diplomacy at a domestic level. So the process of consumption and symbols of consumption are as important as the decision which Modi is taking.
Absolutely.
And the third and the most important thing, which I would say is part and parcel of Modi's foreign policy, is that he has, in a way, broken somewhere the Nehruvian consensus.
Right.
Though abroad, I have not seen Prime Minister Modi like many others, like Mr. Mahathir. When I was in Vladivostok, I remember he started speaking about temperature in Vladivostok. I don't think Modi has done anything impromptu like that.
Right.
But he has broken away from that. And that is why between 14 and 17, most of the debates in Parliament from the Congress party were about the deviation in India's set foreign policy.
Deviation
so these are the three things I have noticed in the last 10 years.
Absolutely. It's incredible the rate of change that we've seen literally in India's foreign policy. But, Dr. Gupta, You've written about black swan events in one of your recent columns, where you said that, be prepared for a flurry of such black swan events in the next couple of months. And I literally cannot remember the last time that I heard so many countries talking about the use of nuclear weapons. I mean, that was something that we in South Asia were always, burdened with this, that these countries cannot be trusted with nuclear weapons. But today the Western world is talking about the use of nuclear weapons. But, tell us, what are the kind of black swan events that Modi diplomacy will have to reckon with in the months ahead?
I think we have to be watchful of what happens in our neighborhood. And what happened in Bangladesh is a kind of a black swan event. What happened in Sri Lanka was also a kind of a black swan event. While we can understand some trends, but suddenly there is a collapse, as it happened, economic collapse in Sri Lanka and a political collapse in Bangladesh. Nobody was really expecting these to happen. So with geopolitical ferment all around us, on top of that there is climate change, and there are many technology, and there are issues which now straddle the whole world, whether it is in new kinds of warfare, information warfare, etc. Nobody seems to have a clear view as to how these trends will converge and lead to what kind of events. So that's what I meant, black swan events. COVID very much was a black swan event. And we are now seeing things like Mpox, etc. also being talked about. So how do we deal with this? And I think that is going to be a big challenge for Indian foreign policy, just as it is for others also. What happens in our neighborhood? China is certainly a big challenge for all of us. Pakistan, we ought to be watching out where Pakistan is headed. In fact, one could say that black swan events may happen so frequently that they no longer look like black swan events, and they are quite
that's a great line. Black swan events turning into white swans.
I think what differentiates Modi's prime ministership in diplomacy is the medical emergency. You see, we have to really account
Vaccine Maitri and
the COVID. COVID was a global medical emergency. And now you have so many reports saying that, in 10 years, 15 years, the superbug, these medical emergencies have become part of our the diplomatic portfolio.
Right, absolutely. And it's interesting because I don't think there's been a previous time in India's history where we faced 3 black swan events in 1 year, which is a pandemic, a global a standoff on the border, and an economic meltdown. That's 3 in 1 year. And this is something that the government has had to face. But Pramit, can you look into the crystal ball? I know you're not much of a crystal ball gazer, but look into the crystal ball for us and tell us what the big challenges are going to be for Prime Minister Modi's diplomacy in the next 4 years. More black swans, more white swans, or possibly grey swans?
So look at it this way. What we've experienced in South Asia, what we saw in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and to a lesser extent even in India in the election results, was a direct consequence of the COVID lockdown. We saw huge unemployment ballooning across all those countries of South Asia. We saw an inflation spike that followed because of the Ukraine war. And depending on your economic resilience and your political resilience domestically, your governments either collapsed, as happened in Sri Lanka, or your military had to intervene to save your government, as happened in Pakistan. And in the case of Bangladesh, which to be fair tried very hard, went to the IMF first. They had actually the best foreign exchange reserve condition of all of these of the smaller countries. They had, should we say, a delayed reaction in which the political legitimacy of the regime collapsed. So I think in many ways, I wouldn't say these are black swans, these are more like gray rhinos. The macro situation was negative across the board, but depending on how well you could handle that. And in India, of course, we saw Prime Minister Modi, despite his popularity, losing 60 seats in the election. But India had the greatest degree of resilience of all of the South Asian countries. handling that post-COVID economic these economic problems. What are we going to see next is going to be difficult to say, but it's clearly not going to be as bad economically as it has been post-COVID. Nothing quite matches the damage that was done to that economy. So the question for him is, how do I recover? How do I get the economy back on track? And particularly, how do I get those employment numbers back to what they were at least before 2019? So you'll see now, for example, he's reaching out to the Gulf states. He's going to get a good relationship, UAE, Saudi Arabia. Let's double down on IMEC, ITU2. Gaza has frozen the eastern side. Western side can continue. And there have already been reports in the media that UAE in particular is prepared to say, yes, we can double down on that. We want to signal that this investment, this connectivity corridor that we're building will continue irrespective of what happens in Gaza. So one element of this foreign policy is, how do I leverage that to create more investment, and how do I get that foreign capital flow into my country? That's one. Second, it's going to be that China is signaling, and this I think is a good signal for him, but it's a temporary one, that we don't want any problems right now. We have domestic problems. We have a huge economic problem at home. And so the Chinese have been signaling. They've sent an ambassador after 2.5 years. I've met Chinese teams which have said we are interested in normalizing the relationship, reducing tensions. And they're very clear. We're doing this because we have a domestic situation at home. So this is an opportunity for India. And you can see Jai Shankar, the foreign minister, and the prime minister, the foreign minister, meeting Wang Yi, his Chinese counterpart, repeatedly. He said that 75% of our outstanding issues on the border have been resolved. The Chinese have said we have walked back 4 places on the border from Galwan. Everything points to a normalization, which is perfect for India, because we could also use a couple of years of peace with the Chinese. We don't need to have an additional burden, if you wish, of having to tackle the Chinese in the north. So I think, and of course, the America relationship, I think, is, despite a few hiccups here and there, broadly stable. We are probably one of only 2 or 3 governments in the world that does not care whether Harris or Trump comes to power. The relationship, in our view, will remain more or less the same. There's general confidence on the Indian side. We don't have to worry about who comes to power in Washington. So on the great power side, I think we are in a great shape. But what are the things we need to watch out for? In my view, the big problem, there are 2 couple of smaller crises in our neighborhoods that we have to watch out for. One is the collapse of Myanmar. Myanmar civil war, the junta is losing authority so rapidly that it is now basically Yugoslavia of Asia. And it looks like it's heading for a situation of a bunch of warlords who are fed on heroin and huge numbers of weapons. This is now, you could see it spill over into Manipur, but even the Chinese have complained this is now spilling over into Yunnan province in the south. So that's one. It's a neighbor we forget, but it has a 1,400-kilometer border with our country, That's one that we have to watch out. Second is the return of the Islamic State. Quietly, the ISKP has come back, and it's nesting in Tajikistan and in Pakistan. It hasn't hit us yet. It has focused on attacking Iran, Central Asia. It's attacked Russia twice, and is now popping up in Europe, and even has a team of them were caught in the United States. So the ISKP is back, and it's always said that India and Kashmir are one of their targets. So we have to assume that at some point, this organization is going to resurrect, to some degree, the Islamic terror problem that we've had.
Thank you very much, Pramit. Thanks for outlining those crystal ball moments that the Prime Minister would be possibly looking at. So that's all we have time for this evening. We're talking about 10 years of Modi diplomacy for you that we've just seen, and the black swans, the grey rhinos, and the elephant in the room as the Prime Minister heads towards the United States first and then Russia. But thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Gupta, Pramit Pal Chowdhury, and my colleague Kartikeya Sharma in the studio here with me. The Russia-Ukraine war has threatened Europe's stability. It's also impacted food and energy security and created shockwaves in a world barely recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been re-elected for the 3rd time. He's the longest-serving head of the largest democracy in the world. He's redefined India's identity on the world stage. So is he positioned perfectly now to broker peace between Russia and the Ukraine? Watch our documentary Modi the Peacemaker. Can he end the Russia-Ukraine war? Dropping on the app today.
India under Prime Minister Modi has this very unique position wherein one can go and talk both to Putin as well as to Zelensky. This is something which other countries do not really have, not even China.
He has been able in moving towards peace as far as this major conflict, which is really creating great difficulties and problems for the whole world is concerned.
Work has started. Would they stay on course? Would war factories selling guns allow peace? To most people, it appears that if anyone can make it possible, it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Modi hai to mumkin hai.